I think of myself as like a marriage counselor between someone and God. Like, how are you guys doing? Anything you guys want to talk about, work through, or excited about?
I was amazed at how powerful it was to have a spiritual director pray for me because she would offer to pray at the end of our sessions. And there was something about that felt so sacred.
I am going to chew all my food. I'm going to not drive more than 5 miles over the speed limit. And I'm not going to interrupt people when they talk, just for 1 week.
I think so many times we forget that we can have fun. We can have fun in our growth. It doesn't have to be like white knuckle grin and bear it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Guiding Light. I'm Jenna Carson,
I'm Sierra Larson.
and we are so fortunate today to be with our very special guest, Kimberly Malone. Kimberly, thank you so much for being with us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Kimberly Malone is a prison educator and spiritual director whose work centers on healing, growth, and transformation. For the past decade, Kimberly has volunteered and worked inside New York jails and prisons, and she currently runs a college program at a women's correctional facility. She also serves as president of Rising Hope, a prison education program that has been transforming lives in New York State prisons for 30 years. Kimberly is a graduate of Fuller Seminary in California, where she focused on self-care and sustainability for individuals working in high trauma settings. She is a spiritual director, retreat leader, and workshop facilitator, bringing her passion for intentional living to everything she does. Kimberly lives in New Jersey with her husband and two stepsons. We're so thrilled again, Kimberly, to have you. And we want to tell you listeners that we're so lucky we get to have two parts to this episode. So our first part is going to focus on spiritual direction and what Kimberly calls spiritual games. And then we'll invite you to join us next time for part two, where we talk about more about Kimberly's work in the prison system and how these games and spiritual practices apply to our lives. So, Kimberly, tell us first of all, what is spiritual direction?
That's a great question. I don't think I was familiar with that role. Most of my experience growing up, it was not a part of my faith community's experience. And so a spiritual director is someone who you meet with. Sometimes I think of myself as like a marriage counselor between someone and God. Like, how are you guys doing? Anything you guys want to talk about, work through, or excited about? And so it's just carving out that space. Obviously, each of those relationships are so unique. I think my 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 view of how God interacts with people has expanded immensely by the experience of people pulling back the curtains and sort of sharing what's going on in their intimate experiences with God. How God speaks to people is so diverse. So the nuts and bolts of it is generally I meet with people for about an hour a month, and that time is sort of dedicated to a conversation about your what's going on in your spiritual life. I find that people come to me sometimes deeply identifying with a faith tradition, or they're, have had a long-standing relationship with God. Some people come because they aren't sure what they think of God. And a lot of times what we're doing, it's different than sitting in a church and listening to sermons. It's different. It's not counseling. It's basically using the details of your days to sort of see if you can identify how God might be moving or what kind of invitations God might be having for you in your specific life. I've been meeting with my spiritual director for over 10 years now, and she has moved with me through so many different seasons of my life, so many different conundrums, so many different things. And it's almost like a depository. Like I've been sharing with her all these things, and often she'll ask really insightful questions that will bring me into a different direction than I might if I was just thinking by myself. Or she can feed back to me themes that she's heard me share over our time together. So it can be another tool in someone's team.
Yes. I've experienced that as another tool. I started meeting with a spiritual director a few years ago, right when I was about to join the military. And I was amazed at how powerful it was to have a spiritual director pray for me because she would offer to pray at the end of our sessions. And there was something about that that felt so sacred. And, I guess if I had have listened to my ego, like, oh, you don't need a spiritual director, and never tried it, then I'd be missing out on all these incredible opportunities to reflect and pray together and grow together. I love how you talked about she has moved with you over time, right? And that's a really precious bond. So you've talked about, oh, go ahead. Sorry. It looked
I'm
like you.
going to say sometimes people come meet with me for a session or a couple sessions, and I have some people who I've been meeting with for years. I've been doing this for about 8 or 9 years now, and it is so interesting how you interact with different people. So when I was looking for a spiritual director, there's actually a search engine called Spiritual Directors International. And you can find around the world, you can find spiritual directors that might be meeting over virtually or in your area. And so when I first moved to New York City and I was looking for a spiritual director, I found a few. And the first one I went to, I didn't feel relaxed. I didn't feel like I could share my soul. And that's definitely a requirement for that conversation. And then when I met with Carolyn, who became my spiritual director, I cried, and it wasn't sad. It was just this, like, I have been longing for this conversation, longing to talk to someone about what was going on in that area of my life. And she was a fantastic listener, and I felt safe with her. And to your point, Jenna, I find in my spiritual direction sessions, the prayer at the end is a way to let someone know, I have been listening to you. In my spiritual director training, the very first day we were in training, the instructor said, listen for what shimmers. And I love that idea of listen for what shimmers, because there's sometimes a little emotion behind a statement and that you can kind of draw out, or the spirit is sort of nudging you or guiding you in a different direction. And I'm often thinking about how I'm listening to God and I'm listening to the person in front of me at the same time. And I do think I've seen God move in really powerful ways with that active listening.
Oh my goodness. I got goosebumps when you said, listen for what shimmers. I've never heard anyone articulate that phenomenon of, especially as a therapist, as a chaplain, listening and hearing something that someone didn't say, but that's there. And it's shiny. It is. It's like, oh, that meant something more than what you said. What was that? And following that. I've never heard it like described that way. So I love that you put language to that because I wouldn't ever have been able to articulate that so well. So I love that. Thank you.
Kimberly, another thing that you utilize as well as listening for what shimmers, you have come up with a practice that you call spiritual games. And I love this. And please tell our listeners what are spiritual games.
Sure. I have been listening to a few of your podcasts, and I feel like there are some themes of being intentional, people who are sort of hungry to sort of put things into practice or to move things in their life. And growing up in the church, I always heard the language of spiritual disciplines. And probably as an eager, hungry, young person, I was like, what am I supposed to do here? And so I would listen around, and it felt like devotions at a certain time, or prayer before meals, or all these sort of, again, the word was disciplines. And it sometimes sounded like you'd be in trouble if you didn't do it or something, like the idea of discipline. And I prefer the idea of spiritual games. And I think about when I play a game, like, I intend to do something, I try it. it doesn't work, wah, wah, like try again. And so I have been playing spiritual games for a long time, and I'll give you some examples of what I mean. So back in 1995, when I was heading into my senior year of high school, my mom brought me a little bit kicking and screaming to this time management seminar. It was led by a group. Some people know it now as Franklin Covey, but at the time it was Franklin Quest. So I went to this time management seminar. And again, I'm at a point in my life where I was just like looking for frameworks to figure out assessments. Like, how am I doing in life? And this very, very simple assessment that I learned from that seminar was just 4 quadrants of spiritual, social, emotional, mental, and physical. And I'm so glad that at such a young age, I started thinking about myself and my growth holistically, as opposed to just, what college am I getting into and what jobs have I, achieved and things like that. And so this idea of in each of those areas, what are small steps that I can do to grow in each of those areas? So I think I've had a very good weekend if I have hit a social, an emotional, a spiritual, a physical, and a mental activity that during that weekend, for an example. So some of the first games that I played when I was in my late 20s, I was living at the time as a live-in assistant in a L'Arche community. L'Arche is a Catholic organization that has been providing homes for individuals with physical and mental disabilities. And I was living there as an assistant at the time. And because my work and my living space were the same, I needed a break. And so I went to a retreat center. There was, I don't know, a convent of Lithuanian nuns nearby. And I called them up and was like, can I come? Can I just come for a few nights? And I had a few hour trip to get there. And I brought a whole bunch of books with me. And I ended up reading, oh gosh, the title is going to elude me at the moment. It's The Way of the Pilgrim. It was like this small little book that I could read in a few days. And it was about this, like, I think it's Russian. It was from a long time ago. And the question was, what, how do you pray ceaselessly? That was like the point of the book, is that the pilgrim had this question and he goes on this pilgrimage to find it. And the point in the book is this prayer that you can pray at the same time as you're doing other things. And so he had this mantra of, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And I was curious about that. And I was like, well, I want to try it. So for the whole drive home from this retreat center for a few hours, I decided I was going to speak that prayer out loud in the car for 3 hours straight. And I was like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And it started to get weird. It was like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Like, and it was raining, so my windshield wipers started going, and so there was this metronome of like, dun, dun, dun. And so like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And I was delighted and surprised to find that the next morning when I woke up, that prayer was still sort of, that rhythm was in my head. And I started doing dishes to like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And you start to realize how many times you might need that prayer. Like I said, I was living with some folks with disabilities, and Frank, he just was like a little brother who knew how to push my buttons sometimes. And I'd be like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, when Frank would do that. Or I was living in a small town where there weren't too many people my age, and I happened to see someone who was handsome going into the bank, and I was like, oh, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Like I just found that that prayer was so applicable in so many different settings. And that was probably in like 2002. And so for 20 something years now, I've been praying like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me in my spiritual direction as I'm sitting with people, and like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on Jenna. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on Sierra. So that's an example of how I started. I'll tell you about another prayer challenge was that I decided, again, this was probably in my early 30s, like that I wanted to learn more about love. I was looking for love. And I was like, God, what do you have to say about love? And so that very popular passage, 1 Corinthians 13, I started there and I decided for an entire year, I would read that passage every single day for an entire year. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. And I, at first, the first few months, I just was reading it, but then I started wanting to play with it. And so I started thinking of things like love is patient. At the time, I was a counselor at a drug recovery program. And I was, yeah, I was asking myself, I guess maybe stop and start. At the time, I was thinking about love is patient. And I asked myself the question, what does it mean to be patient? And so I gave myself 3 rules for one week, which was I am going to chew all my food. I'm going to not drive more than 5 miles over the speed limit. And I'm not going to interrupt people when they talk just for one week. I was going to slow things down and try to be patient. So I did my patient week. And then the next week I was like, love is kind. Like, what could I do to encourage love is kind? And at the time I was a CATS program director at a homeless shelter. And as an experiment, I invited other people to join me in this. I had the staff write kind notes to the residents, and I had the residents write kind notes to the staff. And there was this palpable infusion of kindness emanating in that facility for that week. And it was, I was like, wow, kindness is powerful. What does it mean to not envy? I started just like taking these and in very practical ways, being like, I want to live this. I want to try this. I want to play with this. And it has grown over the years. Like, as I said, I have those 4 different areas. So it's starting to, after that point when I did the first Corinthians 13, I started annually picking one thing that I was going to like get in really deep. So like that next year, I was very intimidated by cooking. I had no idea what to do in the kitchen. I was throwing out recipes once I realized I didn't have the parsley for the garnish because I thought I don't have all the ingredients. And I decided I'm gonna cook 2 recipes a week for a year. And so I did that. And now today I love cooking. On Sunday afternoons, you'll find me in the kitchen cooking for the rest of the week. And so I have a theory. I was telling Jenna about this. I feel like some people peak in high school. I was like, I want to peak at 80. So I'm like, don't judge me. I'm on my upward swing. And so I feel like these practices are like really practical ways that I can take steps towards great at 80, whether that's physically, mentally, spiritually. Every year I'm trying to dedicate like what's one more small step towards becoming the person that I want to be.
Yes.
Wow.
What
Wow.
a,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Tira.
Oh, I was just gonna say, wow, there's so much there, and I just appreciate all of it. What's coming to mind is, again, I'm so glad you pointed out I'd never thought about this, that of it being a value of ours here on the show is intentionality. And I love that careful attention in a way that's fun, in
Yes.
a way that is challenging and but that's fun. And I love the part about the silly voices where you're in the, because that's still like I could totally relate to that. And I think so many times we forget that we can have fun. We can have fun in our growth. It doesn't have to be like white knuckle grin and bear it, you know? It can be play. And it can be play that is intentional and that connects us to our higher power in a way that works for us, that we enjoy, that it doesn't have to be, stiff or just plain ritual in this for the sake of ritual, but it is something that is intentional about connecting us with the divine and enjoyable. and that grows us. I love the concept, and I just see all of that in those examples, and I really appreciate it.
I went to a Easter play one year when I was visiting my brother out in Montana, and they brought in animals for this play. I mean, this was no joke. And the actor who played Jesus had the best laugh. And it made me realize, like, I don't always think about Jesus laughing. like, like Jesus laughed. Like I kind of always think of it, like you said, sometimes as like serious or have tos, or I'm gonna get in troubles, but actually there is this great creativity. There is this great invitation to co-create and to play and to bring something into fruition.
What gave you permission to start play? I mean, you talked about being with the nuns and reading the pilgrimage book, The Pilgrim's Way. Is that
Way of the Pilgrim, yeah.
The Way of the Pilgrim? Were there other things going on in your life at the time that helped lead you to get to a place where you could kind of let go of a prescribed way of, quote, spiritual discipline and lean into play?
I think it's from reading the Bible so thoroughly, looking for formulas and being so disappointed that they're not there. Like, I wanted rules, I wanted guidance, I wanted, direction. And I think, again, at some point along the way, I was like, there isn't. And I at probably when I was younger, I tried to force them into my readings. So, for example, it's probably in me from a young age, because I in middle school, I remember how bold is this? Reading the Bible, I was reading the Gospels, and I decided, I think I only got to partway through Matthew in this attempt, but I was going to decide what I agreed with and what I didn't. And I put a little star next to the things that I agreed with. And I had some sort of coding system that I was using in my Bible, just be like, yeah, I'm with this, and when I'm this, I'm not. It's laughable now, but I look back and I can see my theology as a middle school girl. And when Jesus is flipping tables, I'm like, calm down, Jesus. Like, that is not going to make you friends in middle school as you are getting angry like that. And it probably, reveals my own uncomfortableness with my emotions, seeing Jesus demonstrate. So instead of seeing that as permission, like I can get angry, I saw it as like, shh, calm down. And so uh, again, that didn't work. Like over the years, you just kept on getting, I have read the Bible through and through looking for reasons for why we suffer. And it's not in there. But what is in there are things like, I will be with you over and over and over again. I will be with you. I will be with you. And so I think, I think that in part, and then also I've had this long standing relation. It's probably the longest relationship I've ever had in my life, besides maybe my mom, is in middle school. I started having conversations with God in journals. I think I didn't know who to write to in journals. And so I was like, dear God. And so I've been having these like long standing conversations with God. And just like in how your friendships grow, like we have inside jokes now. We have gone on vacation together. I mean, just there has been this like really rich, deep relationship. I'll give you one example is when I was in high school, I was in a play, which was Cabaret. I should not have been in that play as
I'm amazed they did that in high school.
yeah. I was like a Kit Kat girl in like and in that play, there's this song that's just so silly because the song goes, "If you could see her through my eyes, you wanted to wonder at all." And it's hilarious because the person who's singing it is dancing with a gorilla, like somebody dressed up in a gorilla costume in the play. Fast forward many, many years later, I'm sitting in a time of just journaling and prayer. And before I even got to that, I was like thinking my thoughts, and I was feeling down on how I looked that day. I was like just feeling like undesirable or like whatever. And into my mind, I feel like God whispered, "If you could see you through my eyes, you wouldn't wonder at all." Which was funny because in the play they were talking about a gorilla. But at the same time, it just feels like we have this language with one another and we have this interactions that invite, like I said, collaboration and creation. I I have heard God's voice in both gentle sort of guidance, like, girl. We've had fights. There was one time, ooh, I was so mad at God. The best thing I could think to do is that I went to church and I sat there, and when the communion time came, I was like, "Nope, I'm not going up. I'm not eating with you because if we eat together, you might think we're fine. We're not fine." We've clearly gotten over it, but like I think it's through relationship.
I love that. I love everything that you said. Oh my goodness, I'm just connecting with you so much right now, just on the relationship that you're able to have with God when we're not so stuck in ritual. That we come out of that ritual and we focus on relationship. And yeah, I remember recently I was doing something and I felt God in it and I was like, where have you been? Like what? Hey, I'm good to have you back. Where have you been? And he's like, I didn't go anywhere. You were mad at me. And I was like, oh, I
Oh,
was mad at you. I'm so sorry. And he doesn't leave us. We leave him. Sometimes it's because we're upset. Sometimes we just, we walk away, but he's always there. And it's just like, a lot of close relationships. It ebbs and flows and, we want to be right. And we're not. He's right, but he helps us understand his side and his point of view in a way that we can understand, in a way that we can connect with him. And I think, just the part where it's just like, oh girl, like he does that and he corrects in just such like a gentle way when I need it to be gentle, in a funny way when I need it to be funny, in a really harsh way when I need it to be harsh because I'm stubborn and I wouldn't learn any other way. And it's all just so loving. It's that he loves me enough to have the patience to develop a relationship with me. God of the universe has time to put into this relationship because he loves me. And it's just, I don't know, it's just so incredible. And I appreciate you sharing and giving insight into your relationship with God and how that looks for you, and focusing on that relationship over, rote ritual.
Kimberly, what would you say to somebody who feels like the relationship has never been there? Someone who hears this, you and Sierra saying these really lovely things, feeling so close to God, but wow, I don't feel close to God, or I've never had that experience. W- What would you invite that individual to explore in spiritual direction?
sure, sure. I mean, just so like our human relationships, we have different relationships with different people. So I can be in, even just thinking about, I have a twin brother. We both have been on this earth the same amount of time. He has a different relationship with my parents than I do. Like in the same way that we all have different relationships, I think part of our invitation is figuring out what ours sounds like or feels like or where it shows up. So in spiritual direction, one, there's probably two hints that I encourage people to pay attention specifically to for themselves. One is, what brings you delight? And because we are designed so differently, that is a different answer for each person. But I think that's one of the spaces where God shows up in for us, whether we know it or not, is like, what are the things that move us, that jump our hearts, that just sort of we are impacted by. And so that is one sort of, I don't know, thread that people can tug on to sort of find how they were designed and how they're made. And I think when you start down that path, then maybe you find your creator. And the other one is longings. What are you longing for? I think that's like other language that God uses, and maybe language that's more accessible for some folks. Of Again, we are all designed really uniquely, really differently. Our longings and our delights are like our fingerprints, they're all really different. If you start paying attention to those things, like sometimes you can start to hear themes or messages or, and like I said, invitations to sort of, why is it that you are interested in that? I have two boys that I'm watching growing up, like fascinating process to see them become, to see them start to figure out where their interest lies or who they want to spend time with. And I I think while that's going to look different for everyone, and again, I'm speaking on like decades of this into this relationship, so I'm sure it sounds different for different people at different stages of their their own experience. But I speak in analogies. One of the analogies that has been helpful to me is I think of my heart as a house. I personally have never owned a house, but my sense is that when you buy a house, you there's like a lot of work that goes into the maintenance, the care, mowing the garden and deciding what to put on a wall and fixing broken pipes and all sorts of other things that are the care and the maintenance of that house. And in my heart house, there is that kind of maintenance too. And I think what that means is like in this analogy, for me, love is inviting someone into that house. And if I'm going to love someone and I'm going to invite them into that house, am I embarrassed about the presentation of it? I'm like, oh, step over that. I'm sorry. I'll get to cleaning that. Or is it a home that you have really cultivated that you can welcome someone into, sit on a couch in front of a nice warm fire with something warm to drink and be like, enjoy that space? And what I mean by that space is like knowing your interior voices. Are they kind? Are they gentle? Are they ones that other people can hear and you're not embarrassed to let them hear? And I think that when part of the idea of cultivating this interior world that we could live in is that so much of what we're doing outside, on our resumes, in our, how we introduce ourselves to people, if we live a good long life, eventually those identities won't be as prominent. Our job won't be as prominent. Our parenting might not be as prominent. Even our relationships might not be as prominent. My mother-in-law just turned 99 last week. And her life now looks like she's hanging out in her bed. And I think she lives full time more often in her heart house than she ever did when she was in her 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s. And so I want to be simultaneously working on my resume and working on my finances and working on sort of these external things. But I see these spiritual games as the work of taking care of that heart home. And it is holistic, and it is, my relationship with my body. It is my relationship with my emotions. It is my, fears or anxieties or the things that are keeping me captive. Those are all things that I am paying attention to as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the analogy of the heart home. One thing that came to my mind as you were talking about that is I feel like God is that friend that can come over anytime and you don't have to clean up for. You don't have to like, oh, call
Already
me
knows.
before you come so that I can panic clean for 30 minutes before you get here. Like he's the friend that's like, leave it. When I come, I'll help you clean up. We'll chat, we'll hang out, we'll drink some lemonade and talk while we clean up in here. And it's fine. And he's that friend. And so I love that analogy and also the connection to the relationship that we have with God, because I feel like a lot of times if we don't have that relationship or we're new or trying to find that relationship, we feel like he's the friend we have to clean up first for before they come over. We have to make sure everything's tidy and organized before we let them in. And he's the friend that's like, I don't care what your house looks like. I want to see you. I'm coming over and just let me in. I'll help you clean up. It's not a big deal. And we love those friends. We really love those people in our lives. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. This has been so insightful. We are going to wrap up part one of this episode and invite you to think about your heart home. Think about caring for it and inviting all the love into that space. Thanks so much for joining us for part one of this incredible episode with Kimberly Malone. We invite you to tune in next week for our follow-up episode, part two of the conversation. And in the meantime, please check out the links that are in the show notes. Kimberly has written several incredible essays, pieces, sermons, articles, including one for the Marshall Project that is particularly powerful. So please do check those out. And in the meantime, we hope that you follow the peace.